The dawn of a day from 1820 to 1860 cast a grim light over the lives of enslaved Africans across the United States, particularly in the cotton-rich expanse of the Deep South, encompassing states like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana, where the first rays of sunlight marked not a new beginning, but the onset of a grueling struggle against labor, harsh weather, and unrelenting cruelty. Welcome to The Glorious Historian, where the silenced voices of enslaved Africans resound through time. From brutal chains to unbroken spirits, we unveil their struggles, resilience, and legacy. Subscribe now, share your thoughts below, and journey deeper into their truth. Let their voices guide your heart. Listen on, that pushed the boundaries of human endurance to their breaking point with every passing minute. Plantation owners, adorned in fine wool suits that symbolize their wealth, power, and social superiority, orchestrated a system where the pursuit of profit dictated every aspect of the day, setting schedules that began before dawn and stretched far into the evening, their decisions driven by economic gain rather than any semblance of compassion or humanity, transforming vast tracts of land into a battlefield where survival itself became a daily contest. Black men, women, and children, dressed in tattered cotton shirts and dresses that provided scant protection against the dew-soaked earth, the biting morning chill, or the sun's relentless ascent, rose from their meager resting places with bodies already weary from the previous day's toil, their hands calloused and blistered, their spirits strained by the unending cycle of work that offered no respite. Overseers, cloaked in gray wool coats that insulated them from the same hardships they imposed, enforced this harsh-dawn ritual with barked orders and the crack of whips, their role as taskmasters critical to maintaining the plantation's productivity, their indifference a chilling reflection of the era's systemic brutality, a mirror to a society that viewed human suffering as a necessary byproduct of wealth. The harshness of this dawn was deeply rooted in the domestic slave trade, which forcibly relocated thousands from the Upper South to the more brutal conditions of the Deep South, as documented in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, bringing new captives into a world where unfamiliarity with the land, language, and customs heightened their vulnerability, making the early morning call to labor a particularly daunting challenge. Historical narratives from Barracoon by Zora Neale, Hurston, and X-Posts by @African Archives reveal the physical toll of this early start, with accounts of exhaustion setting in before the sun fully rose, children as young as 6 roused to work alongside adults, their small frames burdened by tasks beyond their strength. Yet the enslaved found resilience in shared whispers of encouragement, brief moments of solidarity, or the quiet humming of spirituals that kept their spirits alive. The introduction of stricter labor quotas during this period intensified the dawn's demands, pushing workers to their limits with expectations of clearing fields or planting seeds under the watchful eyes of overseers, while decorative objects like broken hose, symbols of worn-out tools, and empty water buckets, emblems of denied sustenance, became poignant markers of their plight. Despite the overwhelming harshness, the enslaved clung to their cultural practices, passing down oral histories in hushed tones, carving secret symbols into wood scraps, or finding strength in community bonds, transforming the pain of the dawn into a quiet defiance, a legacy of endurance that began to take root amidst a day too harsh to survive. A resistance that would echo through generations and inspire future movements for freedom, their unyielding spirit a beacon in the dim light of morning. The morning hours from 1820 to 1860 unfolded as a relentless test of endurance for enslaved Africans, as the plantation fields of the Deep South, stretching across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, demanded back-breaking labor under a rising sun that offered no mercy, turning each task into a prolonged battle against time, exhaustion, and the oppressive heat that began to build with every passing hour. Black workers, clad in tattered cotton clothing that clung to their sweat-soaked skin, their shirts and dresses torn by the rough work and offering no shield from the sun's rays or the thorny undergrowth, toiled with hoes to clear land, plows to turn soil, and cotton sacks to haul harvests, their bodies bent under the weight of their burdens, a routine enforced with unyielding rigor by white overseers in gray wool coats who drove them forward with whips, shouts, and a constant threat of punishment. Plantation owners, dressed in fine wool suits that signified their detachment from the physical labor and insulated them from the moral weight of their actions, set daily quotas that stretched human limits, their wealth built on the sweat and suffering of those below. A system where the morning's work determined not just productivity, but the very possibility of survival, as meticulously recorded in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston provides vivid accounts of the physical strain, with workers collapsing from heat and hunger before noon, their bodies pushed beyond endurance, while ex-posts by ANU African Archives describe the frequent use of broken tools, hoes with splintered handles, plows with rusted blades, as a constant reminder of the neglect and deprivation that define their labor. Yet resilience emerged as they shared sips of water from scarce buckets, or supported each other's faltering steps with a hand on the shoulder, their strength a quiet protest against the morning's harshness. The labor was compounded by exposure to biting insects that left welts on exposed skin, thorny plants that tore at their legs, and the dust kicked up by their efforts that clogged their throats, adding layers of suffering to an already grueling routine, while decorative objects like a cracked whip, a symbol of their oppression, and a rusted hoe, a marker of their toil, underscored the tools of their endurance. Despite the relentless pace, the enslaved responded with ingenuity, using broken tools to fashion makeshift aids, sharing knowledge of the land to ease their burden, or finding moments to rest in the shade of cotton plants. Their endurance a testament to survival against a morning designed to break their bodies and spirits. A survival that laid the groundwork for their quiet rebellion and the preservation of their cultural identity amidst the plantation's unyielding demands. The midday sun from 1820 to 1860 brought a cruel and unyielding intensity to the lives of enslaved Africans, its heat beating down in the fields of the Deep South, spanning Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, with a ferocity that turned the day into a furnace of suffering, testing their will to live with every blistering ray and challenging their physical limits in ways that seemed designed to crush their spirits. Black individuals, dressed in tattered cotton shirts and dresses that offered no protection from the sun's scorching rays, labored under its glare, their skin burning with sunburn, their bodies dehydrated from the lack of water, and their movements slowed by the oppressive heat. A torment overseen by white overseers in gray wool coats who denied even brief rests, their commands delivered with a cold authority that brooked no resistance. Plantation owners, clad in fine wool suits that insulated them from the same heat and shielded them from the moral consequences of their decisions, profited from this midday toil, their wealth tied to the cotton harvested under such brutal conditions. A system where the sun became an unwitting ally in their oppression, as documented in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston details the frequent collapse of workers from heat stroke, their bodies giving out under the relentless sun, while ex-posts by at African archives mention the scarcity of water, with buckets often empty or guarded by overseers. Yet resilience shone through as they sought shaded moments under trees or shared wet cloths torn from their own garments, their strength a quiet defiance against the sun's cruelty. The midday heat led to dizziness, fainting spells, and a pervasive sense of despair, with the air thick with dust and the scent of sweat, while decorative objects like a sun-bleached water bucket, a symbol of their thirst, and a wilted plant, a marker of the parched earth, became poignant reminders of their struggle. Despite the overwhelming conditions, the enslaved found ways to cope, using songs to lift their spirits, passing down herbal remedies to treat sunburn, or supporting each other with words of encouragement. Their endurance a powerful protest against a day too harsh to survive, a protest that preserved their humanity and laid the foundation for their resistance against the environmental and human forces arrayed against them. The afternoon from 1820 to 1860 imposed unyielding demands on enslaved Africans as the fields of the Deep South, covering Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, required continued labor despite the mounting fatigue, turning each hour into a test of physical and mental fortitude that pushed them to the brink of collapse with a relentless pace that offered no mercy. Black workers in tattered cotton clothing soaked with sweat and torn by the day's labor struggled to carry heavy loads of cotton, wield hoes with trembling hands, and meet quotas that seemed impossible, their bodies aching from the morning's toil and their spirits strained by the afternoon's heat, a task enforced by white overseers in gray wool coats who wielded whips to maintain the pace, their authority absolute and their cruelty unwavering. Plantation owners, clad in fine wool suit that marked their untouchable status and protected them from the same suffering, set quotas that ignored human limits, their wealth growing with each bale of cotton harvested under these conditions, a system meticulously recorded in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston recounts the exhaustion that led to fainting, with workers collapsing under the weight of their burdens, while ex-posts by U.S. African archives note the lack of breaks, with overseers driving them even as the sun dipped lower. Yet resilience persisted as they supported each other with shared strength, offering a hand to lift a fallen comrade or a whisper of hope to keep them going, their endurance a quiet rebellion against the afternoon's demands. The labor was made harsher by the accumulation of dust that coated their lungs, the sting of sweat in their eyes, and the constant threat of punishment for slowing down, while decorative objects like a broken plow, a symbol of their overworked tools and a dry water jug, a marker of their dehydration, underscored their plight. The enslaved responded with ingenuity, using teamwork to lighten loads, hiding small breaks in the rows of cotton, or teaching each other survival tricks. Their strength a testament to survival against a day designed to break them, a strength that fueled their quiet resistance and preserved their community bonds amidst the unyielding afternoon. The evening from 1820 to 1860 brought lingering toil for enslaved Africans, as the fields of the Deep South, stretching across Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, demanded work until dusk, extending a day already filled with hardship into a twilight of exhaustion that drained their physical and emotional reserves with every labored step. Black individuals, dressed in tattered cotton garments torn by the day's labor and stained with the dirt of the fields, continued their efforts under fading light, their bodies weary beyond measure, their hands trembling from hours of work, a burden overseen by white overseers in gray wool coats who pushed for every last effort, their cruelty unrelenting as they cracked whips to hasten the pace. Plantation owners in fine wool suits reaped profits from this extended work, their wealth tied to the day's output, and the final bales of cotton harvested in the dimming light, a system noted in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database as a key driver of their economic success. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston describes the struggle to stand upright, with workers stumbling as darkness fell, while ex-posts by at African archives mention stolen rest, with overseers rousing those who paused, yet resilience emerged as they shared whispered hopes of freedom or brief moments of camaraderie, their strength a quiet defiance against the evening's toil. The labor was complicated by the fading visibility, the risk of injury from unseen obstacles, and the chill that began to settle as the sun set. While decorative objects like a dim lantern, a symbol of their limited light, and a worn sack, a marker of their harvest, became emblems of their endurance. Despite the exhaustion, the enslaved found ways to cope, using the twilight to plan escapes in secret, humming songs to bolster morale, or supporting each other with shared warmth. Their endurance a powerful protest against a day too harsh to survive, a protest that preserved their spirit and laid the groundwork for their resistance against the lingering demands of the plantation. The night from 1820 to 1860 offered a fragile and fleeting rest for enslaved Africans, as the quarters of the Deep South, scattered across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, provided little relief from the day's hardships, turning sleep into a brief respite marred by hunger, cold, and the constant fear of disturbance that threatened their fragile hold on survival. Black men and women in tattered cotton clothing, stained with the day's labor and offering no warmth against the night's chill, lay on hard-packed dirt floors or thin pallets, their bodies aching from the day's toil, their minds restless with the weight of their circumstances, a condition enforced by white overseers in gray wool coats who patrolled the quarters with lanterns, their presence a constant threat to any hint of peace. Plantation owners in fine wool suits allowed only minimal rest to maximize the next day's productivity, their wealth built on the deprivation that kept the enslaved compliant, a system documented in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database as a deliberate strategy. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston recounts sleepless nights filled with the groans of the weary, while ex-posts by at African archives mention cold drafts seeping through cracks. Yet resilience shone as they huddled together for warmth, shared tattered blankets, or whispered prayers to find solace. Their strength a quiet protest against the night's fragility. The lack of rest led to chronic fatigue, weakened immune systems that invited illness, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability, while decorative objects like a tattered blanket, a symbol of their scant comfort, and a flickering candle, a marker of their dim hope, underscored their struggle. The enslaved transformed this fragile rest into a space of resistance, using the darkness to plan rebellions, preserve cultural stories through oral tradition, or teach their children survival skills. Their endurance a testament to their unyielding spirit against a night that offered little reprieve from a day too harsh to survive. Food scarcity from 1820 to 1860 had a devastating and pervasive impact on enslaved Africans as the plantations of the Deep South, spanning Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, provided meager rations that turned hunger into a daily struggle, weakening their bodies, clouding their minds, and threatening their very ability to endure the relentless labor imposed upon them. Black individuals in tattered cotton clothing that hung loosely over their emaciated frames received small portions of cornmeal, moldy bread, or occasional scraps of meat, their stomachs growling with a constant ache, a neglect overseen by white overseers in gray wool coats who withheld additional food as a means of control, their authority reinforced by the threat of starvation. Plantation owners in fine wool suits prioritized profit over sustenance, allocating just enough to keep the enslaved alive, but never enough to restore their strength, a practice meticulously recorded in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database as a cost-saving measure. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston details the effects of malnutrition, with workers suffering from swollen limbs, brittle hair, and a pervasive lethargy, while ex-posts by at African archives note instances of stolen food, with overseers punishing those caught seeking more. Yet resilience emerged as they shared scraps from hidden stashes, used wild herbs to supplement their diet, or supported the weakest with what little they had, their strength a quiet defiance against the scarcity. The lack of nourishment led to diseases like scurvy and dysentery, reduced lifespans, and a constant battle against faintness, while decorative objects like an empty bowl, a symbol of their hunger, and a wilted vegetable, a marker of their deprivation, became poignant reminders of their plight. The enslaved responded with ingenuity, foraging in secret, teaching each other to stretch rations, or finding spiritual sustenance in songs, their endurance a powerful protest against a day too harsh to survive, a protest that preserved their community and fueled their hope for a better future. The weather from 1820 to 1860 launched a relentless and unforgiving assault on enslaved Africans. As the Deep South's extremes, scorching heat, torrential rains, and biting cold, turned each day into a survival challenge that tested their resilience against nature's fury and the human cruelty that compounded it. Black workers, in tattered cotton clothing that offered no protection from the elements, faced blistering sun that burned their skin, sudden storms that soaked them to the bone, and winter chills that left them shivering, their bodies exposed to the whims of the climate, a hardship overseen by white overseers in gray wool coats who demanded work regardless of conditions, their indifference stark. Plantation owners in fine wool suits ignored the weather's toll for the sake of profit, their wealth built on the labor extracted under these harsh circumstances, a system noted in the transatlantic slave trade database as a factor in high mortality rates. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston describes the misery of wet clothing clinging to shivering bodies, while ex-posts by At African Archives mention frostbite that blackened fingers and toes, yet resilience shone as they sought shelter under trees, shared body heat in the cold, or used leaves as makeshift coverings, their strength a protest against the assault. The weather caused pneumonia from wet lungs, heat exhaustion from prolonged exposure, and permanent joint pain from cold, while decorative objects like a soaked hat, a symbol of their drenched state, and a frozen branch, a marker of winter's bite, underscored their struggle. The enslaved adapted with ingenuity, learning to predict storms, preserving warmth with communal huddles, or using mud to protect against sun, their endurance a testament to survival against a day too harsh, a survival that reinforced their resistance and cultural continuity. The overseer's constant vigil from 1820 to 1860 weighed heavily on enslaved Africans, as the fields of the Deep South, covering Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, were monitored with unyielding scrutiny, turning every moment into a test of obedience that eroded their autonomy and kept them under a shadow of fear with relentless oversight. Black individuals in tattered cotton clothing that bore the marks of their labor worked under the watchful eyes of white overseers in gray wool coats, their every movement tracked, their pauses punished with whips or threats, a control enforced with a cold efficiency that left no room for respite. Plantation owners in fine wool suits relied on this vigilance to maximize productivity, their wealth dependent on the obedience it enforced, a practice documented in the transatlantic slave trade database as a cornerstone of plantation management. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston recounts the constant fear that gripped their hearts, while ex-posts by At African Archives mention harsh punishments for the slightest infraction. Yet resilience emerged as they planned in secret, used coded signals to communicate, or found strength in shared glances, their strength a defiance against the vigil. The oversight led to chronic stress, sleeplessness from fear of discovery, and a sense of entrapment, while decorative objects like a raised whip, a symbol of their punishment, and a ledger, a marker of their tracked labor, underscored their plight. The enslaved responded with cunning, hiding tools to disrupt work, teaching resilience to the young, or preserving culture through silent gestures, their endurance a protest against a day too harsh to survive, a protest that fueled their hope for freedom. The family's fragile bonds from 1820 to 1860 were a lifeline for enslaved Africans, as the Deep South's plantations, spanning Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, threatened unity with frequent separations, turning love into a struggle that sustained their spirits amidst the chaos of their captivity. Black families in tattered cotton clothing that marked their shared hardship clung to each other through forced sales and labor, their connections tested by the overseer's cruelty, a bond overseen by white overseers in gray wool coats who enforced divisions with cold indifference, their authority absolute. Plantation owners in fine wool suits profited from the sale of family members, their wealth built on the emotional wreckage, a system recorded in the transatlantic slave trade database as a deliberate tactic. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston describes the anguish of lost children, while ex post by at African Archives note rare reunions. Yet resilience shone as they shared memories, held hands in secret, or sang to comfort each other, their strength a defiance. The separations caused deep grief, a sense of loss that lingered, and a constant fear of further division, while decorative objects like a torn letter, a symbol of their separation and a child's toy, a marker of their love, underscored their bonds. The enslaved preserved their family ties with whispered promises, taught children their heritage, or planned escapes together, their endurance a testament to survival against a day too harsh, a survival that reinforced their resistance and cultural identity. The legacy of a harsh day from 1820 to 1860 stands as a profound testament to the resilience of enslaved Africans, their survival against unimaginable hardships, shaping a narrative of strength that inspired future generations, left an indelible mark on the fabric of history, and served as a foundation for the fight for justice that followed with unwavering determination. Black men and women in tattered cotton clothing marked by scars, sweat, and the memories of their toil endured from dawn to night, their bodies broken by labor, but their spirits intact, a struggle that fueled the abolitionist movement, with stories of their suffering and unyielding endurance as documented in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Barracoon by Zora Neale. Hurston recounts their tales of survival, passed down through oral tradition, while ex posts by at African Archives highlight their legacy, with descendants honoring their strength. Yet resilience persisted as they taught survival skills, shared cultural songs, and built community bonds, their strength a defiance against the harshness. The day's toll included permanent injuries, shortened lives, and a legacy of trauma. Yet they transformed their pain into resistance, slowing work to disrupt production, hiding tools to hinder progress, or educating the young in secret, actions that grew into a collective resolve, while white overseers in gray wool coats and owners in fine wool suits faded with the Civil War's end, their power undone by history. Descendants reclaimed family histories, revived suppressed traditions, and erected memorials, while decorative objects like a sunrise, a symbol of hope, and a broken chain, a marker of freedom, became emblems of their legacy. Their endurance remains a beacon of hope, inspiring all who face oppression, a light that shines through the darkness of a day too harsh to survive.